We are live for Coffee and Kabbalah, Parshas Vayakhel, Pekude. So excited to be here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, person and online. And thank you so much to today's sponsor, Deanne Rosenfelder, in schus of a elevation for the neshama of her dear departed father, Shlomo ben Aryeh. His neshama should have so much aliyahs. We should all do extra mitzvos in his schus in honor of his yahrzeit, which might even be today. It was, yes, this week. Okay, there we are. So now let us dive right into Parshas Vayakhel. We are on the end of the second book of the Torah. Interestingly enough, I just found out that the Torah, the entire 5 books of Torah, which we cover over a year, is actually the size of an average novel. An average novel, the amount of words is only 80,000 words, about 80,000 words in the Torah, which is the size of an average novel. But its scope and its depth, and it includes all the halachos that we keep, right? And all of the stories of the Torah, the stories of our father, the story of us becoming a nation, traveling in the desert 40 years, or conquering Eretz Israel. So it's actually fascinating how short it is. But we are reaching the end and the conclusion this week of the second book of the Torah, book of Exodus, or like we like to say, the season finale. We are now in the season finale, the climax of the second season of the Bible, of the Netflix show, The Bible, the new hit. And we are in Exodus now, and we are finishing up, and it ends really interestingly. It ends kind of like a recap of what we just said a few parshas ago. It seems like the ending, this finale, is just a recap. What do I mean? In Parshas Truma and Tetzaveh, a couple parshas ago, which we do not have classes on this year because we were covering Adar and Purim, but Truma and Tetzaveh went into detail on the instructions of how to build, of Hashem's instructions to Moshe, of exactly how to build his home down here, the Mishkan, the dwelling place of Hashem. Teruma went through all of the kelim and the structure of the Mishkan, the materials used in great extensive detail. The materials used, the size, the exact size, materials of all of the structure of the Mishkan and the kelim for the Mishkan. And Tetzaveh went through primarily the clothing that was worn by the Kohan and by the priests who would serve in the Mishkan, the exact colors, tones, garments, when they would wear what garments, etc. And that was given to us in great detail, which already was a question, like why do we focus so much on the details of which exact materials used for what and exact measurements. And we learned that this home for Hashem is actually not just a one-time Mishkan, a temporary dwelling place that they would take with them as they travel in the Midbar, but rather this was Hashem's, it's actually a model home. The Mishkan is the first home for Hashem, and hidden inside the details of the materials and of the sizing and all of the details are actually messages of how ultimately Hashem doesn't want to be confined to a Mishkan that is, a building. Hashem's ultimate goal for creating the entire world, Kabbalah tells us, is that Hashem wants the entire world to be a home for Hashem, a place where Hashem can be comfortable, a place that expresses godliness, a place that is comfortable for divinity, a place that is a vessel to receive divinity, to receive the Shekhinah of Hashem. And Hashem wants every place in the world to be that way, not just to be in the Mishkan. Hashem wants to be in every corner of the world, right? Hence the Shlichim that are traveling to light up every corner of the world to make it receptive to godliness. But the Mishkan was the model home. And we could see that in Efrat, a lot of times there's a replica of a lot of homes, right? First there's a model home, and then they, it might be miniature. And then there's tons of homes that are exactly direct replicas, right? You go into someone's house and you're like, we have the exact same house times 20, right? So ultimately the Mishkan was the model home, and we are meant to then take the Mishkan and fashion our homes in the rest of the world by using the metaphors and the messages from the Mishkan. And there's so many, what we learned from even the idea that we use gold and silver and nechoshes, right? Copper, which comes from like a very low level, and cedar wood, which is like, which teaches us Atze Shittim, and in that we learn in Kabbalah and Chassidus that there's like the shtus, that we should use the folly, the spiritual, we should use the idea of shtus, of folliness, for holiness. We should take like being crazy, use our capacity to just be crazy and use that for Kedusha, etc. That's just some examples, but there's very deep details, very deep messages hidden in every single detail of the Mishkan. And from it, we learn messages of how we can fashion the rest of the world into a home for Hashem. Our homes that we live in, there are rooms we're taught to make into a Mishkan for Hashem. And that's why, every one of our kids' room, we're supposed to, even in our kitchen, the Rebbe pushed to have a tzedakah box nailed to the wall in your home. Part of your home should be it should be a home that's for Hashem. So look, right there is our tzedakah box. On the wall, nailed in. And mice, we have to put one in each bedroom. Every room should have a chumash, a tehillim, a tanya, a mezuzah, right? And we see how a Jewish home looks different than a different home. Even the bedrooms of the children, right? There's a mezuzah on the door. There's negelvasser, right? There's by some homes. We even chose this home over the few replicas even the over like when we moved into this neighborhood, no one lived here. So the realtor took us to like 30 houses and we didn't know what to choose. And we're like, I don't know what to choose. They're all like literally replicas. Like we would like look at the see if there's any difference. I'm like, well, this one is slanted. This one has a yard like, on the other side. It was so similar. Like the color of the floors were different. And this house, one of the reasons one of the big sellers for this house was that there was an extra sink built upstairs, not in a bathroom, just for Netilat Yadayim, because my husband is very careful not to wash Netilat Yadayim in the morning, not from bathroom water. And in our old house, he would bring from downstairs. My father would even just to the bedroom to have it by your bed in the morning, because we don't walk 4 amos without washing our hands, because that's like a Kabbalistic like strict thing that people who like follow Kabbalah and Chassidus are careful with. So one of the sellers of this house was that there's a sink that we don't have to go downstairs to prepare Netilat Yadayim every night, so we could have it by our beds in the morning. So yeah, even the physical home is different. Anyways, the idea is that we ultimately want to make every part of we want to fashion our home, our hearts, our space, every space that we enter, our minds, our bodies to be a temple, right, for Hashem. Our hearts should be a place for Hashem, welcome. And every single part of our being should be modeled after the Mishkan. And we should see from the Mishkan what is a home for Hashem. And then from there, we learn how to infuse and make every part of the world into a home for Hashem, right? Every space that we enter, our children's school, our children's home, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so now that was really why every detail was important. Now, this week's parsha, suddenly we have Truma Tetzaveh, those two parshios episodes that are about the details, right? Then we had Kisisa, and then suddenly now we're at the end of this book. The Vayakhel Pekudei are Moshe then coming back with the instructions. He was on the mountain. Hashem gave him all the instructions of how to build the Mishkan and the clothing of the Kohanim. And now Moshe is repeating all of that to Bnei Israel. And these two parshios, Vayakhel and Pekudei, which are sometimes read separately and this year read together, Vayakhel and Pekudei together, are almost an exact repetition of the previous parshas, Truma Tetzaveh. It's just what Hashem told Moshe then, and now Moshe is repeating it to Bnei Israel. And it's so unusual. It seems so unusual and so out of place, especially in the Torah, which is so concise. And the Gemara tells us that a Rikiva would expound with pages and pages from one extra dot on top of a letter, from one extra like sign on top of a letter, because the Torah was so exact. So the Torah added an extra vav or an extra word or an extra letter. We have so many teachings from that to understand, because the Torah is so exact and so direct and so concise. And even like without that, even if I was telling you a story, right, and I was telling you, and this happened to me, I went to the mall and then I bumped into this person and then she's this and this, and then I was like, and then I met my husband and I told him, and then I start to tell you again, and I told my husband the whole story again. It would be so annoying. Just tell me, and I told that to my husband, right? And I repeated everything that happened to my husband. You don't have to say it all over again, right? Why is the Torah telling us, well, Moshe told it all over to Bnei Israel again, right? It could have merely said, and Moshe repeated everything that Hashem said to Bnei Israel, and that's what they did, and then they built it, right? And this is actually the building of it. This is what they did. They collected it, Moshe. So in this week's parsha, let's backtrack a little bit. I'm going to give you a summary now. So that was just the context of what this parsha, these two parshas that we're covering entails. Going back into a little bit more detail, it says that Moshe now returns from the mountain. He comes down, he gathers, Vayakhel, the name of the parsha is he gathered. He gathers everyone together, teaching us that the Shekhinah can only rest if we're in unity, if we're together, right? If one person built the Mishkan, it wouldn't be a home for Hashem. It has to be all of us working together. He says, I need all of you to be involved in this. And it says, he gathered all Bnei Israel, V'yomer lehem, Ela dvar mashar tziva Hashem lo says, and this is what Hashem told me to do. And it could have just said, and he told them, but no, it goes into all the details. He goes into all of the details of what they need, and he says, and these are the things that we need you to donate. It has to come from you. We want it to be your donations. We need these 15 materials that are the main materials used in the Mishkan that are repeated 3 times in the Torah. If I haven't, I'll let you know what they are. The fabrics, you want to know what they are? Okay.
It's in the puzzle.
Right, wood, gold, fabric, different beautiful threads, linen. Yeah, they're in the psukim. I think it's repeated in Plato possibly. I'm not sure. And he tells them all, and then they donate all of it. They says that they donate so quickly that the person in charge of donating says everyone has to stop because there's way too much. We're gonna have nothing to do with it. They have to stop donating. The men and women donate everything, and then they carry out the instructions, right? They have all the skilled people come forth. He says anyone who has any skill in fashioning and creating and weaving and sewing and designing and carving and etching and sculpting, now is your time to come forward with all of your skills. I want to know what each person's skill is, and you're going to be put to use, right? And Bezalel was in charge of the project with Eliyav, and they used their skills and skill sets, unique skill sets, to make this come together. And then at the end, Moshe, let me actually have this running away. There's a whole team of people doing it. It goes again through the parsha of exactly what they did, right? Down to the measurements all over again and the materials used. and the Mishkan is finally complete, all of this kalim are brought to Moshe, and Moshe is the one who can erect it because it was so heavy that all the people together couldn't lift it because of how heavy and weighty it was. And Moshe was able to do it with Hashem's help. Hashem told Moshe, you just put your hands on it. It will look like you're doing it, but I'm just doing it. And I feel like that's a message to all of us in everything. When things are too heavy for us to carry, and we feel like I can't, you're not going to have to do it anyways. You just make as if you're doing it. Do your hishtadlus, pretend you're doing your part, but really, right? Like that beautiful story about the beautiful poem about I saw two. Whenever a man looked back at his life, and he saw that throughout his whole life there was two sets of footprints, and he saw that Hashem, God had been with him. It's not even a Jewish poem, right? God had been with him, walking alongside him. But when he goes back and sees his struggles in his life, the times that he was in the most pain, he's only one set of footprints. And he says, where were you, God, in all my struggles? And God says, I was carrying you, my child, right? I was holding you. And sometimes in our biggest struggles, we feel like I can't do this on my own. Even with everyone around me, I don't feel like I can do this. And that's when Moshe is like, no one could do it. Only I can. You just put your hands on the Mishkan, pretend you're lifting it. And that's why sometimes in our struggles, Hashem just wants our input so that it's through our meat channels, through the meat on the natural channels. So we just do our hishtadlus, but the actual help doesn't have to come the exact way that we do our hishtadlus. We just have to do our part and then say, Hashem, you're the one who's lifting it anyways. We hand it over to Hashem and say, Hashem, you carry me and you lift it. That's how that ends, signifying. And then Hashem's Shekhinah then enters the Mishkan. A cloud, and that's signified by the cloud coming over the Mishkan, and they see that the Shekhinah is there and all the miracles, etc. And that is these parshios.